Well, I think it was a few weeks ago, I was playing with my daughter Naomi. She's about 20 months, and we're kind of at that stage now where she can start to kind of like identify parts of her body. And so we'll play this little game. She's sitting on my lap, and I'll say to her, "Where's your ear?" And she'll point to her ear, and I say, "Where's your nose?" Well, she's got a little experience with putting her finger in that direction, so immediately just shot her finger up there. "Where's your belly button?" And that's like kids' favorite question, right? I love how with kids, when you ask them, "Where's your belly button?" it's not this like subtle point like everything. It's like, woo, let's go. There it is. But it's so funny with kids because the body, it's like this thing that they're discovering and kind of figuring it out. It's this cool thing. But then it's interesting as time goes on and you grow up, your body starts to become this much more intimate thing to you that you care deeply about. Like really, I think kind of teenage years, that's kind of the beginning of it. You start really caring about the physical appearance of your body. And then this goes on and on kind of into adulthood until finally you hit the much despised tipping point. And some of you know what I'm talking about. That point in life where your body is no longer improving. And you realize you are living in an aging body. The first wrinkle appears. The joints that used to feel great when you did activities, they start to hurt more. Your metabolism plummets. You used to be able to eat 10 of these things. Now you eat one and you're a disaster, Like you start to realize, man, my body's just not working the way it was used to. And you start to realize we are on this path towards death. We are on this path towards death. Now, that seems extremely grim, right? But I actually believe that coming to grips with that reality, this reality that we are all under, every single person is under this kind of inevitable force of death. Coming to grips with that reality is actually what can lead us to being surprised by the hope of the resurrection of Jesus. See, this is where I think specifically what we're going to focus on today, the resurrection of the body. This is a hope that can actually speak to everyone, whether you're Christian or secular, because guess what? Every person is going to experience this wasting away of the body breaking down and heading towards death. And it's interesting how much our culture fights against this, right? And honestly, it's a good thing that we're pushing back against death, and we try our hardest. The healthcare industry, it is one of the leading industries in our culture. I think in 2021, I found that over $4 trillion was invested in healthcare, invested in trying to push back against death. And think about even the commercials that we see, right? So many commercials. Take this pill, do this plan, take this shot. Whatever it is, all these things that are kind of pushing back against death. And it's amazing amidst all the incredible things that we can do in terms of healthcare. We've cured diseases. We can do amazing surgeries and transplants, all this stuff. No matter how much we invest, we can't stop death. It's the one, we can't beat it. It's inevitable. But now that hope is one that resonates with every person. A hope that this isn't the end. That there is more with these bodies. That this actually isn't what our bodies were created for. Our bodies weren't made to just waste away and die. And it's interesting thinking about the Easter story, because when Jesus rises from the dead, he wasn't just announcing that he was alive and had conquered death, but in the risen Jesus, we are actually getting a picture of the physical body that we are looking forward to. Like Jesus is a picture of what is going to happen to each one of us. And I love how theologian N.T. Wright, he puts it this way. He says, Jesus is both the model for the Christian's future body and the means by which it will come. So what we see in Jesus that Easter morning, the risen Jesus, that is a picture of what is to come for us. And so what I want to explore today is that reality. What is the hope in the bodies that we have to come? Because we've been talking about in this series that, when you die, your spirit departs from your physical body and it goes to be with Jesus. Your body immediately upon death is in the presence of Jesus. But what we've been talking about is that that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal isn't just to be spirits with Jesus, but the way the Bible talks about what the ultimate goal isn't the life after death, but the ultimate goal is the life after death. That breaks my brain a little bit there. But the ultimate goal isn't to be spirits with Jesus. The ultimate goal is when Jesus comes back at the resurrection, raising our bodies from the dead and uniting soul with a resurrected body to live for eternity in the new heavens and the new earth. So the question I want to explore today is, what is the hope that we have for those bodies? What is that hope? And so there's going to be three things I'm really focusing on here for the hope that we have in these resurrected bodies. The first one is our bodies will be physical. So Paul starting out here in 2 Corinthians, uses very physical language in this analogy that he uses. He says here, "For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is, when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God himself and not by human hands. We grow weary in our present bodies and we long to put on our heavenly bodies like new clothing." So Paul creates this contrast between these bodies we live in right now, these earthly bodies, and the bodies we will live in, these heavenly bodies. And I think those words maybe sometimes throw us off a little bit, earthly and heavenly, because sometimes when we hear earthly and heavenly, what we associate with that is physical, earthly, and spiritual, heavenly. And this is why in our world today, so often when people think of heaven, they think of spiritual, we're just like floating around up here. But the reality is that heaven isn't this spiritual floating up here. And this is what we see in this analogy that Paul uses here, is he uses very physical language. He talks about our current bodies as earthly tents, and I love this contrast. He compares it to our tent to a house, but he goes on here and he says, kind of like Paul knows what we're thinking here. He says, "For we will put on heavenly bodies. We will not be spirits without bodies." So if you walked in here thinking heaven is just living as spirits forever, Paul's like, no, you've got a much better hope to look forward to. You are going to live in a physical body like you live right now. And yet Paul doesn't stop there. But instead he says the bodies in which we will live are going to be so much greater than the bodies in which we live right now. And that's where this, wow, got excited there. We good? We good here? Okay. We're all good. The bodies in which we live, there's this contrast that's made between a tent and a home. Anyone here love going camping, living in a tent? Okay, wow. Not as many as I was expecting here. Okay, Evan, yeah, I know you do. Okay. Man, Minnesotans are kind of weak. Don't love getting out in the tents, learning new things every day. But I can enjoy going camping and being in a tent. And you might enjoy that for a night, or maybe some of you are pretty brave and you can even go like a week, maybe even a couple weeks. But I'm gonna guess most people, even Evan, the most passionate person about camping, doesn't want to live in a tent forever. Probably not, right? We recognize that a tent has a very temporary element to it. It's not permanent. And Paul says that that's how it's going to be with the bodies that we will inhabit, that these bodies now are going to seem like a tent, like so temporary, but the ones that we will inhabit are going to in some way be even more physical, even more bodily. And in a way, you know how when you get home from something like a camping trip and you walk in and there's just that like, I'm home. I'm at rest. I'm comfortable in this place. That's what it will be like in our bodies at the resurrection. A complete and total comfort, security in that this is what I was always created to live in. So our bodies will be physical, but it doesn't stop there. Our bodies will also be immortal. Paul goes on and he writes here, I love these words he uses. He says, while we live in these earthly bodies, we groan and sigh. But it's not that we want to die and get rid of these bodies that clothe us. Rather, we want to put on our new bodies so that these dying bodies will be swallowed up by life. Isn't that just an incredible phrase there? Swallowed up by life. These bodies we live in right now, they are wasting away under this just inevitable force of death. It's inevitable. But he's saying the bodies we will inhabit, they are going to be renewed and restored under this inevitable force of life. Being filled with life in the new heavens and new earth, it's going to be the inevitable state where you are constantly in this state of being full of life, feeling incredible, full and complete perfection. Not wasting away, but experiencing the fullness of what your body was always created for. Living in this creation and not having your body being this thing that you're like fighting against to try to do things, but it's working with you in perfect harmony. And you get to enjoy the fullness of not only your body, but all of creation in this perfect place where it is not wasting away. So our bodies will be immortal, swallowed up by life. But the last thing I want to focus on is this reality. Our bodies will be redeemed. There's something that's always fascinated me in kind of the resurrection account, and I'm not just talking about Jesus rising from the dead, although that is pretty darn fascinating, but it's actually later on where Jesus, he appears to his disciples. And oftentimes this is the account where we hear about like doubting Thomas, right? They're in the locked room and Jesus, he appears to them, but there's something in there that has kind of always caught my attention, maybe even puzzled me, and it was why Jesus, after rising from the dead, had scars on his body. Oh, wow, double advance there. We're going to go back. Hey, why did he have scars on his body? You ever think about that? Like oftentimes, we're talking about this is the risen, glorified, perfect body of Jesus. This is the body that is giving us a picture of what our bodies will be like. So why is he bearing marks of the horrible pain and suffering that he experienced? You see, in this, we start to realize that what God is doing through the resurrection of Jesus and restoring all things, it's so much bigger than just taking your pain and suffering away. But every pain, every hurt, everything that you've experienced in this body isn't just going to be taken away, it's going to be redeemed. Paul uses this incredible analogy here over in his first letter to the Corinthians, where he's talking about the resurrection of the body. He says, but someone may ask, how will the dead be raised? What kind of bodies will they have? What a foolish question. Apparently, Paul thinks there's dumb questions. He says it right there. What a foolish question. When you put a seed into the ground, it doesn't grow into a plant unless it dies first. And what you put in the ground is not the plant that will grow, but only a bare seed of wheat or whatever you are planting. And so Paul is saying here that whenever you're planting a seed, right, the seed is just, it's nothing like the plant that is going to come. And yet it's from that seed that the plant grows. And this is where he goes on and says, it is the same way with the resurrection of the dead. Our earthly bodies are planted in the ground when we die, but they will be raised to live forever. Our bodies are buried in brokenness, but they will be raised in glory. They are buried in weakness, but they will be raised in strength. With this analogy of your body right now being like a seed, you know, a seed isn't that remarkable. And yet any gardener knows that if you value a plant, you're going to value the seed a lot. And so the first thing that this shows us is that we value our bodies right now. Even though our bodies aren't what they will be, we value them because God values them immensely. Notice, God isn't just discarding our bodies at the end. He is renewing and restoring them. That means he sees them as valuable even right now. So every body is valued by our Heavenly Father, and thus we take care of our bodies. We strive to experience life in these bodies even as they're wasting away. But this analogy, it also gives us incredible hope. Incredible hope because as a seed, the seed of your body, it might be filled with a lot of things. And maybe not a lot of great things. That seed of your body, it might be filled with the hurt of someone who crossed the line and took advantage of your body. That seed might be filled with the guilt of living a life with your body that you know is wrong, that you know it goes against God's design, and carrying the guilt of that. That seed might be filled with the weakness of a body that's born with a disability, a body that has to endure suffering for its entire life because of it. That seed might be filled with the pain of a terminal diagnosis, disease, or even just wearing down from growing old. There's so many things that can fill that seed of our broken bodies that are wasting away, but what Paul says is that seed is planted with all of its weakness, all of its brokenness, all of its hurt into the ground. And that at the resurrection, that seed will sprout. That seed will produce something far greater than you can imagine. The promise in this is that whatever you have experienced in this life, whatever hurt, whatever pain you are carrying, God is not even just taking it away. He is going to use it to produce something into eternity that is far greater than you can imagine. And so the hope that we have right now is nothing you endure right now is meaningless. Even if we can't see the why now, God is using all things, everything that you endure in this life, to where he produces something absolutely magnificent. And where even though it was immensely painful, you will look back and be able to see, look at how God worked. That's how it was for Jesus, right? The wounds of Jesus, what were those? They were a sign of the faithfulness and love of God. It will be the same thing with your wounds at the resurrection. Every wound, every pain, all it will be is a testament of the faithfulness of God to you and how he didn't give up on you, and how he loves you through everything, and he sustained you through it all. That is the hope that we have in these new bodies, and that is a hope that can surprise us and lead us in this life right now. Because the reality is, if we live in that, whatever you have endured with your body in this life is not the last word. The last word is at the resurrection of Jesus, when he raises your body and he redeems it in full. That is the last word for every single one of us. Let us pray. Gracious God, we long for that day of not just a removal of pain and suffering, but Lord, where you take every hurt that we have and you redeem it all. And so, Lord, in this life, we care for our bodies. We care for other people's bodies. We value the life that you have given us. And yet we also trust and hope that amidst this broken world, you are producing something so much greater in eternity than we can imagine. So let that hope surprise us. Let that hope lead us. Let that hope guide us here and now, that we have heavenly bodies, these bodies made new and full in you. And we long for that day and praise you for what you're doing. In your name, Jesus, amen.